Oh, all right. We're good. All right. Good job. All right. Well, oh, here she comes. Julia, welcome back. Heathen. Okay. Well, good morning. I spent the majority of this week actually preparing 3 different sermons for a conference that I helped out with Friday night and then Saturday, and it was a really, really good time. But kind of coming into this weekend, I was really leaning on the Lord to speak some vision and direction for what we were supposed to do, talk about, and I'm sure you guys have figured this out by now. I am definitely not against doing something other than a sermon. I am more than open to what the Spirit has. And surprisingly to me, he led me to something I have shared before, but it really is the fundamental principles that this church is founded on. And this week, as I went back and I listened to the sermon God spoke the church to me through, as I dove into some of the notes and things I've been taking about, man, how can I better communicate vision? How can I better communicate mission? What can I give the entire church to say, we are winning when we do these things? I really felt like the Lord just took us back to Luke 10. And every time I have a question about something about the church, Luke 10 has always provided the answer. And so where we pick up our story is actually Jesus in a conversation with a Pharisee. And I think this is so important because I never want coming to this church to become a habit that has nothing to do with relationship. And that means relationship with God and relationships with people. And so we're going to pray and get into it. So Father God, I just ask that right now you would come down. And Father, that we would learn what it means to be your church. Pray all of this in your mighty name. Amen. All right. Picking up in verse 25, we're going to read this entire kind of scene, and then we're going to go through and break it down. But it says this. Verse 25, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit everlasting life? What is written in the law? Jesus replied, how do you read it? Then the teacher answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said a man was going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So also a Levite, when he came to the place and he saw him, passed by to the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on the man. And he went to him and he bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn, then took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have had. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law replied, I suppose the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. So we actually, we founded the church off the entire chapter, but I think this captures the heart of what we do here better than probably any other verse in the Bible. And The reason that this sticks out to me is because I, for the longest time, had taken on an identity that I was not a people person. In fact, when I think about who I was, seventh grade for me, like I was living out my dream as far as sitting in the corner, not talking to anybody, attending church, and having a couple friends, but not actually witnessing, not actually reaching out, not actually engaging with the people around me. And I would justify that to myself because, well, that's just not who I am. I'm just not a people person. Then really what I found is the gospel was a little bit tasteless to me. Now, I loved Jesus. I loved the Word. I loved everything about the Word. I loved God. But the gospel, sharing the gospel, was dry. And I think so often as Christians, this is the place that we get to is we forget where we first came from. How many of us have read that verse in Revelation which tells us, "But this I have against you, you have forgotten your first love." And so what is the response when you've forgotten your first love? It's to go back and do the things you did at the start. And today I want to give us the opportunity to go back to the fundamentals of what it means to be a Christian, of what it means to be the church. And so we're going to walk through some of this. First off, I'm sure we all catch this, but after asking his question, I think we all agree that's a right answer this lawmaker gives you. Says, "What does the law say? How do you read it?" And he says, honestly, the right answer, he says, man, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's a right answer with the wrong heart. And we know it's the wrong heart because the man then asks, who is my neighbor? Who is it that I am called to love? And I believe as we get into the word today, I believe we're going to see clearly what a good neighbor looks like, because typical Jesus, he doesn't answer the question, he paints a picture. And so the question we should be asking ourselves when we participate with Jesus, when we show up to a gathering of believers, is not, God, are you for me? The question we should be asking is, am I on God's team? I'm reminded of Joshua. He shows up to Jericho. Joshua 1, God has made him a promise. God says, I will be with you, and I will go before you, and I will give you the land everywhere you step. Then you continue reading the book of Joshua. They get to Jericho, and he walks up. He sees an angel of the Lord, and the first thing he asks this angel is, are you for me, or are you for my enemy? And what does the angel say? No. I am the commander of the Lord's army. And we can so often get in this mindset where we go, God, are you for me? Are you for my plans? Are you for my destiny? Are you for me? And then I'm not trying to say God isn't for you. I am trying to say that's not the question. The question is, God, am I on your team? And as we read what Jesus has to say, it hits such a deep chord within me. And today when I think of myself, I think of myself as a radically different person than I did when I first heard this message. I think of myself as someone who loves people, someone who wants to engage with people, to share the love of Jesus with people, and I believe it's because he gave me his heart out of this passage. And what does it say? It says that they took this man, they stripped him of his clothes, and they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. And I'm sure we all know this, but what is a priest? A priest is religion. They're the one whose title is to show up and do something about this issue. But how many of us as believers, we take on the attitude of, yeah, it may be my job, but that's not my problem. And because I didn't cause this problem, it's not my job to solve this problem. Because they're not where I do my work, it's not my job to do my work. And then you have a Levite come by, and what is a Levite? A Levite is someone who helps the priest. They're the tribe of Israel set aside to help people. And what does he do? He crosses to the other side. His entire job is to fill in where the priest fails. In fact, his identity is, I am the tribe that represents God. And then you have the Samaritan walk up, and I love the tension in the room when the Samaritan's brought up. And we know this, but I want to paint us this picture, which is, well, first off, the history goes that the Assyrians conquered part of Israel about 800 years before the time of Jesus, and they intermingle with the Jews, and they create Samaritans. And so that's where you get the word Samaritan. It's a Jew and an Assyrian having a child. That's a Samaritan. And I love this because Samaritans and Jews hated each other. And you see this in other places in the Bible. The woman at the well, she's a Samaritan. We read that passage and we're like, Jesus is alone with a woman, kind of inappropriate. Not what's inappropriate about that passage. Not what's awkward about that passage. There's no issue with Jesus talking to a woman even though no one's around. The issue was a Jew was talking to a Samaritan. You see this tension throughout the Bible. Now, here's what's so hypocritical to me, even about the disciples. Did you know they took the gospel to the Samaritans and they didn't consider them Gentiles? You can read, actually, Peter and John go to a city and they're sharing the gospel. They receive the Holy Spirit, and then they go back and behave like everything's normal. But then when Peter gets the vision, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Peter gets a vision about the animals coming down from heaven. God says, take and eat, and Peter begins to share. Man, I believe God is calling us to treat the Gentiles the same. Listen, they had already been going to Samaritans. It was clear Samaritans were thought of as Jews, just the dirty kind. They weren't thought of as Gentiles. And so when you read this passage, we're not talking about somebody they didn't think was a Jew. We're talking about somebody they thought was a dirty, no good, filthy Jew. When we read this passage, I want us to recognize that Jesus has just brought in their worst nightmare of somebody to love. In fact, I believe when Jesus mentions Samaritan, everybody in the room probably starts going, oh, I know, I can fill in the rest of this story. The Samaritan's about to do something real bad to this guy, isn't he? The Samaritan's about to beat him even worse. And yet that's not what happens in the story. You see, Jesus says that the Samaritan, he gets off his donkey. He takes what he has. He takes oil and he takes wine. He cleans the man's wounds and he puts him on his donkey and he takes him to an inn. As I was praying about these 2 denarii, God did something in my heart that I really never expected. Because I've never paid attention to the 2 denarii part of this story. And a denarii commonly is 1 day's wage. And so if you think about what this Samaritan pays when he drops the man off at the inn, he pays 2 days worth of work. And he says, when I return, I will repay whatever other expenses come. And I've never connected this to the death and resurrection of Jesus. But we know that for 2 days, Jesus went to work. And on Friday, he shed his blood. And on Saturday, he took the authority that the enemy had. And you better believe on Sunday he returned. And he repaid everything we were owed. And so as a church, I take that as a challenge. I take that as well, Jesus, Jesus comes here every Sunday. Jesus comes to repay us with his presence, with his word, with the ability to get involved with him every single Sunday. I am not waiting for God to pour out a whole bunch of people. I'm not waiting for God to pull out a whole bunch of influence or impact. I am believing he is rewarding us every single Sunday. And you know what he gives us? He gives us those 2 days worth of work every single week. He reminds us of the blood that was shed and the authority that was taken. And he says, here's what you need to succeed. You have 2 days worth of work that I put in. I believe as a church we need to be a place that believes that is more than enough until Sunday comes around. And even this, I'm using the word Sunday. Sunday really isn't what I want to communicate. I want to communicate every time Jesus comes around. That every time we get in his presence, we are refilled with every single thing we need to go out again and begin loving people. I don't want to confuse you by telling you I'm calling you to be a good Samaritan, because the truth is none of us can meet this standard. Because the standard is, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, no matter what you're in the middle of, you stop and you love your enemy every time. I can't even love the people at Walmart every time. Nobody can love like this. And so I don't want to sell you a story of, oh, I'm asking you to love like this every time. We can't. But you know what we can do? We can love the people God brings to us. I believe a call as a Christian, as an individual, is to try and become more like Jesus in this way. I believe as believers, that's our call, but as a church, our call is a little bit different. As a church, I believe our call is to receive those Jesus would bring to us. And so there are two sides to this. First off, if you're going to be a part of this church, then you need to be a person whose doors are open. In fact, I've been praying about kind of a tagline, something that we can put on any material that captures that heart. And I believe God gave that to me in a very simple statement, and it is this: it's that you are welcome to stay. And as a church, that is who we are. We are a place that says, I don't care what you look like. I don't care what you talk like. I don't care if you're like me. I don't care if you come to church in a bathing suit. You are welcome to stay, because I don't need you to have your act together to come meet with Jesus. In fact, I believe he's the good physician. He's the one who bandages your wounds. He's the one who puts the oil on. He's the one who puts the wine, which will help to purify all those things. I don't need you to come here with your act together. I need you to participate with Jesus. And so my role in that, I am going to create a place that you are welcome to stay. Because here's what I also know. Jesus comes here all the time. It is not my job to fix people. And so when we think about, as a church, man, how do we impact the world? It's very simple. I'm asking you to act like a believer, and when you're at church, participate in what the church is created to do. It's very simple. As believers, we need to ask ourselves the question, are we a good neighbor? Not who is my neighbor. You know what a good neighbor does? They stop when they see someone broken down on the road. You know what a good neighbor does? They go and find out what people need. And they give of what they have, when they have it, when they're there. I believe as believers we need to be good neighbors, and as a church we need to create a place where people are welcome to stay. Our mission statement, I'm sure you've all heard it, is what we love people where we are with what we have when we're there. And our vision has for the longest time been, man, we want to create a place where people come and they know their tab is on Jesus and their welcome never expires. Well, recently, we as the elders got together and we said, man, we feel like that there's something more to the mission. And so we have actually updated our mission statement, and it actually comes from the end of Luke 10 here, when Jesus is talking, or rather Jesus is at the home of Mary and Martha, and they're all sitting, and Mary is at Jesus' feet. And Martha comes in, and she's like, Jesus, could you get Martha to help me out? I'm cooking, I'm cleaning. Could you get her to help me out? And Jesus replies this in verse 41. He says, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. As a church, I believe our mission needed to adjust from just loving people to getting with Jesus. And so our mission as a church has now become, man, when we get together, we meet with Jesus and we love people where we are with what we have when we're there. But the foremost of what we do here is we meet with Jesus. And as we come together and as we have conversations about things we like or don't like about culture, I want to be clear about something. I agree there are things in culture we don't like. There are things we don't approve of, but I want to be clear about what this building is. This building is not where we get to decide who gets to come and who doesn't. This is the building where Jesus brings people he's working on. And so I don't care what people wear when they come here. I don't care the way they talk. I don't care the way they look. Because in this building, we're going to be a place where Jesus brings everyone. Where he brings our enemies. Where he brings the broken and the lost and the wounded. That's what we are. I'm very excited about what Jesus is doing in the church. I really feel like he is growing our influence in a lot of ways. And I have seen it happen so many times. One easy one is the couple who was coming, Marika and Kagan. They came two or three times, and after just a couple interactions with us, they decided to get married. They'd been living together for years. They own a house together. And they'd been pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off, and then they come in here. I didn't even address it with them. I didn't feel the need to fix their problems. I just created a place where Jesus could trust me to care for them. And wouldn't you know it, Jesus himself took care of the convicting. And we went over to their house for dinner, and they said, great news, we got married. And we were like, you got married? That's great news. But we didn't have to fix them. I don't want to be a church that thinks that we are the physician. We're not the physician. We're the support staff. We show up. We go, how can I help you? What are your needs? Because I have good news. I'm just going to take it to the physician, and he's going to prescribe you what you need. Man, do you need money? All right, Lord, do you have money we can give them? Man, do you need love? Do you need a place to just come and not be at home? Man, I want to be that place. My prayer is we would be a house where people come and they feel like they don't have to leave, and they would stay until dark, and they'd be like, man, look at the time. Man, I have a goal. I have a desire to get into a building one day. Man, I have a desire to create a place where thousands of people can feel like I am at home. And I believe that we build a foundation that can sustain that by creating a place today where we say you are welcome to stay. I believe today it is our mission to say, man, we're not in a rush. One thing that caught me as I was studying for our series about rest was Jesus was never in a rush. Like, people never walked up to Jesus. They're like, how you been? He's like, I've been busy. Like, we know he was busy, but he was never rushing to the next task. He always walked. I want to be a place where we walk. I don't want to be rushing to the next season. Man, I want to walk through this one. And as a church, I believe that we are going to be a place where God can trust us to just love. And listen, I am not at all advocating that we say it's okay to live in sinful lifestyles. I think you all know me, you know my heart, and I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying it's okay to live in sin. I am saying it's not our job to fix it. It's our job to create an atmosphere where the good physician, where the great physician can come in and go to work. And he is much better at convicting than I am. Jimmy Evans says something great. He says, I'm a pretty good Jimmy, but I'm a lousy Jesus. I appreciate that sentiment. I'm a pretty good Matthew. I am a lousy Jesus. And for too long, I have tried to fill the shoes of something I was not called to. Man, I'm a good Matthew. I'm a lousy Jesus. I want to be more like Jesus is perfect, but man, I can't pretend like I've already arrived. I'm a lousy Jesus. I'm a good Matthew. So you know what? I'm going to participate with Jesus. I'm going to try and follow in his footsteps. And man, I'm not going to beat myself up too much when I don't hit the standard, because his blood really was enough. I don't ever want to be a place where we think that because we have it all together, that, oh, well, we belong. I've shared this before, but I think the worst day of God's life is the day that Adam and Eve first hid from him. And he asks this question when they say they're naked. And God says, who told you that? I do not want to be the kind of church that tells people they need to hide from Jesus. We are not going to be that kind of church. We're going to be the kind of church that says, come in. Because here, you are welcome to stay. So I want to give us an opportunity to just let the Lord speak to us. Man, I have been thinking a lot about the silly arguments that we get into. And the truth is, there's only one thing that is needed for us, and it's to get in the presence of Jesus. He will do the rest. And I think about the fact that we hear this term, and we have all heard this, where we say, man, you should come to church. And people say, man, I don't belong in church. And I think we ought to start getting offended when people say that. Man, I don't belong in church. And I don't mean offended at them. I mean offended at the spirit of religion that would convince people they don't belong in the presence of the one who saw them where they were and died anyways. I think we ought to get offended at the fact we have allowed this religious spirit to so infiltrate what God set up that people, when they think about church, that their perception is, I don't belong there. Because as Christians, we ought to realize, and really you do realize when you get saved, is my sin didn't just make me bad. It didn't just make me kind of not a good person anymore. It left me dead in a ditch. And no amount of good, no amount of trying ever helped me in religion. Yeah, it taught me about the scoreboard. That's what it taught me about. Do good, do better, and you'll get there. And you know what? Going to church, just participate, maybe just being around good people, man, that never saved a single one of us. Man, you know what it means to be a Christian? To be a Christian means I am so aware of my sin, it left me dead. But I met one who saw me in my ditch. He saw me in my sin, and he so loved me. Not at my best, at my worst. And even in the moments where I did the worst things, he was there even then. Man, I don't believe we serve a God who looks away from sin. He put it all on his son. And we are a place that says, I don't care. Listen, I know we joke about it, but I want to be clear about something. In this church, I don't care if they wear skinny jeans. I don't care if they wear jorts. I don't care if they wear crop tops. I don't care. You know why? Because Jesus doesn't care. Because there was a woman caught in the act of adultery. Do you know what in the act means? It means she was brought to Jesus probably in a bed sheet. And in that moment, he said, I don't condemn you. That's the Jesus we serve. He didn't take advantage of her situation. He didn't even listen. Our God doesn't condemn you even when you're in the middle of it. And we will not be a church that says, oh, well, you don't dress the way we think you should. You don't wear the things we think you should wear. You don't believe the things we think you should believe. You know what? That is none of our business. You know what our business is? Come on in, because we have a benefactor who has paid us to open our doors. And so we're going to create an atmosphere where you can meet with him and he can deal with what you need. I'm not saying sin's okay. I'm saying I'm not the judge. I'm saying Jesus is more than capable of dealing with our sin issues. And as a church, we're going to be a place that says, oh, you're wounded? Man, you're torn up? Man, I was too. Man, sometimes I still am. Why don't you come on in? Because you're welcome to stay. So if you close your eyes for just a minute, I want to invite us all to recognize the beauty of this gospel. Man, I love the idea that I don't have to have it all together. And I want to be a place where people feel that when they come. So for the next couple minutes, Nicole, would you put something on in the background, some kind of song? I want us to ask the Lord to get a heart for his people. Because it's awesome if we understand something, but man, when we get a revelation from God, it moves us to action. I heard it put this way once: pity is a feeling, but compassion is an action. God doesn't deal in pity, he deals in compassion. I want us to become a compassionate church, which resonates with pain and moves to action.
I've got years and years of striving when there was nothing left to prove. Could it really be this simple? Your kindness changes everything.
All right. Well, we are going to finish up the way we do every single week, which is testimony time. So, if God's been doing something good in your life, we want to hear about it.
All right, you ready? God, thank you for today. Amen.
Mom, we're ready for you.
Okay, here you go. Y'all can go next if you want to. Okay, I don't know what I look like. Anyways, I just wanted to share that I had started going to a new Bible study, and 3 weeks ago when I got there, this woman came up to me and she was like, "I feel like I know you," and I was like, "I don't think so." And this week when I got there, she comes like very excitedly up to me and she says, "Kim, I know where I know you from." She said, "Did you work at Gateway at any time?" And I said, "Well, I didn't work there, but I did things there for a long time." And she said, "You're the person who saved me." And I said, "What?" And I'm like, I didn't save you. But she was like, "No, when I had questions about the Lord, we started going to Gateway, and I asked to meet with somebody, and you're the one who came and had coffee with me in at this coffee shop near Target." And when she said it, all of a sudden I started remembering going and having coffee with her. And I said, "Oh, I remember." And she said, "You do?" And I go, "Yeah, I do." And it was really special because I had been asking the Lord to tell me if I make a difference in the world, if anybody even remembers that I went to Gateway or that I helped people, or because you go there for a long time and it's like, does anybody even recognize I'm not there? And so it was super special. So then she ended up telling the whole group. So I said to her, that was an answer to my prayer too, because I had asked the Lord, do I make a difference? And she looked at me and she goes, "Kim, you didn't make a difference in my life. You made a difference in my whole family's life, because my whole family got saved because you met with me at Target, and our whole legacy got changed because you came and had coffee with me." And I recognize that God could have used anybody, but he did use me. And that was a really special moment. And then another woman that I barely know looked at me and she just said, "Kim, I don't think you realize how much of a difference you do make, because every time I'm with you, I just wish I could spend more time with you and get the wisdom that literally falls out of your mouth when you speak." And I just felt like it was the Lord confirming a lot of all the dreams that I have, and I keep getting so close and then getting scared, and I'm not making the traction I wish I was making. And then this other woman who knows nothing about my story looks at me and she goes, "I have a word for you, and it's coming on me right now." And I'm like, "Okay." And she said, "God said if you will just ask him who you're supposed to pour into every morning, and you'll just pour into that person, then ask him who the next person is, and the next person, he's going to open all the doors and make the path clear for you." And she doesn't know anything about my life, so it was just super special. And I just wanted to share that with everybody because it was just a really cool thing. So that was it.
Last week I shared about kind of some of the difficulties we were going through with the business and whatnot,